So I'm more open to just listening to things, seeing things, observing things, and not drawing too many conclusions, but just being with it and then following whatever feels right for me in my own life. I guess that's the best way I can kind of describe my evolution, especially in the last 5 years or so.
That's brilliant, brother. Thank you very much. And I wanted to say that when the C19 situation happened, I was so happy. Why? Because
Why? I mean, why?
for more than half a century, I walked on this planet thinking I'm absolutely insane. I
See,
saw
I told you,
myself,
folks, I'm not alone.
of course not. I saw myself in this B movie, which is so incredibly badly done, where you can see um, the
Strings.
actual, you can actually see the cables moving the dragons or the monsters or something. And I'm like, I was seeing that, and I'm like, okay, but maybe I'm crazy. Maybe there is nothing, and there's nothing gonna be, the gloves are never gonna be taken off. So when the C19 happened, I'm like, oh my God, okay, okay, I'm not insane. There is this thing, there is this CABAL thing controlling the thing, and their agenda, and the negative ETs and all that. I was like, oh, cool. So I am not insane. So that was really great for me because it finally, it's like it was a shoe that I was waiting for it to drop for basically half a century for me, right? Because for you and for a lot of people, their awakening was kind of maybe connected to 9/11 or the C19. For me, I've been living in this zoo for half a century and wanting some kind of, some kind of corroboration that I am not absolutely insane. So that's, I mean, that's the thing that you probably would discover in a lot of old souls like me that I'm like, we've been in this kind of zoo, like, okay, are they ever gonna like figure this thing out? So that was my reaction to the C19. Now I wanted to tell you something, and I have been calling the new age stuff for years now. It's maybe 15 years now. I call it the new cage movement, right? It's way worse than any religion. I because I lived in Berkeley and San Francisco Bay Area, I was well versed the way it is. Now I invented my own term for it. I don't believe in new cage. I am in new edge, which is I made it up. So um now I wanted to say something to you about your evolution, which takes us to our even crazier part of our conversation.
If that's possible.
I know. That's I'm giving a warning for people listening to this. That's like it's gonna get crazy. Um, you were you, and you were doing great, and you were open, and you did this, and you did that, and you learned this, and you learned that, and it achieved the openness. There's only one problem with probably 90% of this people planet on this people on this planet, and that they are NPCs. You know what that is, right?
Nope. Tell me again.
Non-player character. So non-player character, when you play a video game and you go buy alcohol in your video game, the guy says, the barman says, what can I do for you? And it's like, I want a glass of whiskey. And he gives you a glass of whiskey. He's an NPC. There is no There's no actual person playing him. He's a non-playing character. He's got a bunch of code that runs him. And then you ask him, why was there a hurricane in Asheville, North Carolina? It's like, do you want a beer or coffee? He has no more information. That's all he has. A few lines of code, and that's him. Well, according to Dolores Cannon and a lot of other people, more than 90% of the people on this planet are NPCs. As in, what happened to you would never happen to them. As in, they have no cognition. There is nothing behind their eyes. For you, there was something behind your eyes. You saw this thing with the C19 and you saw the YouTube videos. Most people cannot ever get to that level unless they actually carried consciousness. They don't. Now, here is one of the hardest things to say on this. Suffering, William, is a function of consciousness. If you do not have consciousness, you don't suffer. Bad stuff happens to you. How does that sound when I say something like that?
Mixed reactions. Part of it was initially was agreement in the sense of, I was thinking back to your example of the young man helping the old lady with the groceries up the stairs analogy that you used earlier on. And you were saying that you could see me as possibly being someone who would have empathy and a willingness to be able to help. And to a certain degree, that's true. But I also look at it as that woman has a journey of her own to make. And if she enrolls someone to help her, great. If she doesn't and has to do it herself, then that, I feel, was meant to be, because there's something in it for her to discover for herself. And that's maybe a bit deep for a very simple analogy like that, but I think you kind of get what I'm saying around all of that. Then I thought of my mother, who recently, like last year, experienced a lot of physical suffering because of knee issues and getting a new knee replacement at an elderly age, in her mid 80s. And so I thought about that and I questioned that. I'm going, well, she's definitely suffering. And I also know that there's a victim mentality behind her thinking that she's had her whole life. And it brings up a question too, because I had this urge of wanting to jump in on what you were just saying and ask you, do you believe that just because you have a family here on this planet in this plane/dimension, that everyone in your family is either all NPC or all conscious? Or do you feel like even within a family you can have NPCs and conscious beings? So that's a question I wouldn't mind putting back to you as well at some point when you're able to address that.
Okay, so I'm going to address that shortly. So basically what I'm saying is that I gave you the example of the barman being an NPC, right?
Yep.
And you watch him get robbed or like get shot. That barman does not suffer. Bad stuff happens to him. And this is my argument, that guess what? enough bad stuff starts happening to you that actually causes your vehicle at some point to start carrying light. You understand?
You said carrying light?
Yes, because you carry light. That's consciousness. You are
Gotcha.
not,
Okay.
you
Yeah, I
are
just
not
want to
an
make sure for the
NPC.
word.
You are not an NPC. But if you're an NPC and you're just a script, you don't carry light, you don't have any consciousness. But the more bad stuff happens to you, that actually makes you more able to little by little start carrying some consciousness. That's the way I looked at this in this reality. That's the only way it makes sense to see the enormous amount of bad stuff that happens to everybody. But just understand that when you suffer something, that doesn't mean that the NPC sitting next to you who experienced the same thing would suffer. And going back to our little example of the factory and the boxes, if you are moving those boxes and an NPC is moving those boxes, you see somebody get shot, that affects you. That gives you the nightmares. The NPC sees that, so I don't know, whatever. They can't even register it. They don't know what to do with it. They have no idea what it is. They can't wait to get back to what they're doing. So that's
No, you mentioned something earlier about in reference to Dolores Cannon, who gave a pretty high percentage of beings on this planet as NPCs. If I remember, it was like in the 90s. Do you personally subscribe to that high a percentage, or does
I
that
would
really
say
matter
probably
even?
90% is an understatement.
Wow.
Because I feel that this reality is basically, and then there are, this is such a crazy, I mean, I guess I've said that word before, conversation. Because if you listen to Gene Decode, who's, as you know, my go-to source guy, he says there are two, and that Gene Decode doesn't even talk about NPCs so much, but he talks about humans versus mankind. Mankind are not humans. Mankind are basically like Borg. They have collective consciousness, they have no individuation, and they have a single soul that runs them. Mankind are very much like your cats and dogs. That, of course, people are going to argue, hey, my cat has a soul or whatever, but they don't, right? They all have one soul. Maybe some cats have it, I don't know. But I'm just talking about what Gene says, right? So when you come down to it, probably the number of humans on this planet is so small because there's NPCs and then probably there's the mankind and there's I mean, Gene said when his third eye opened, his pineal gland opened, he would go out and he would hardly see any humans. Like somebody's an ET, somebody is a goat, somebody is a insect, somebody is like he's like what it's like going to Walmart was an experience, right?
I'm going to interrupt real quick just to say that I
Yeah,
keep
cool.
thinking about I think his name was Rodney Pfeiffer, a wrestler who was in a movie where he got these glasses, and when he had those glasses on, he could see what was really behind the
Yes,
messages
I think
and
it's
behind
called
the people.
what is it called? The Thing? Not the Thing. I forget the name, but yeah, I actually made a video about that. You probably saw it.
I did. I saw the movie too, but
No,
yeah,
but I also made a video because there's a substance, blue substance that would actually allow you to see that, and then they made that substance super illegal, worse than any kind of like cocaine or something, and it's like a
right.
highly, yeah, I don't remember what's the name of the substance. Um, yeah, I forget the name of the they see or they will or something like that. And so, as for your family thing, I would say without a doubt. I mean, I probably have that. I probably have NPCs as my siblings and conscious people and players as my siblings, both. And I think if you listen to a guy like Chris O'Donnell, I think he talks about the fact that you literally choose what family to go to because of where you're needed, right? But it's really important for people to understand this idea of suffering, and you understand that, like, I was talking to somebody. Now, you have been doing call reads and you've been doing a lot of spiritual things. And somebody asked me, what is my thought about unconditional love? And I said, I don't believe in it. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that, to be honest with you. But it's also, a very difficult thing to achieve. I believe in this in this space, especially when you are here to learn things, and there are so many things that you can see that can be shocking, and it would be a real challenge, a real difficult thing to achieve unconditional love. And when I think of the term unconditional love, because sometimes it's based on definitions, people might have different definitions of what that means. But to me, it's more of an accepting of what is, not necessarily loving it, but not necessarily hating it or
I
having
don't
any kind of
I think
feeling.
you have kind of changed that definition, because I don't see it that way. I don't see
Okay.
unconditional love like that. And probably that's why, maybe because we have different definitions of unconditional love, that we
Yeah.
don't agree. For me, unconditional love is very much gives carte blanche for people to act very badly. So let's talk about the criminal system in the West. Do you know how many victimless crimes exist in North America? And
No, I
you know
don't.
what a victimless crime is, right?
I've heard the expression, don't really know exactly what it means.
It
But
simply
well, for
means
example,
something,
getting a speeding ticket is
right?
a victimless
It's a
crime.
victimless crime, or not paying your taxes,
Yeah.
or
It's a majority. It's a large majority, if I'm not mistaken. And I've heard you speak of this
yes,
before in other videos.
yes. And you know what affluenza is?
Affluenza. Um, it's no, but I love the term. I'm laughing at the term because I can kind of guess at what it might be. Like the craving for constantly wanting to be richer or wanting more, that kind of thing.
No, they invented this term legally. There was a young man, right, young rich boy. He was like 17 or something. He was driving, and because of his driving, he ran over 4 people and he killed them.
Ay,
He was
caramba.
super rich,
Mm-hmm.
and his lawyer said the reason he did that is because he didn't really know. He doesn't live in your world and doesn't know the impact of his thing, and He's too rich to understand the rules of this planet. And I think he got off. So
I
that's the
wouldn't be
kind of reality
surprised.
we live in, where victimless crime is punished to the highest degree, but actually a crime that has victims is considered, well, you know, he didn't know. Can you see how unconditional love can come and play with this a little bit?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah. You know, it's like, it's, have you seen the movie Oppenheimer?
I have not,
Yeah.
but
I
you have
really,
recently, right?
yeah, I really didn't want to watch it, but because I listened to Burning Bright talk about it on Story Hour, on Rumble, Badlands Media, I wanted to listen, I wanted to watch it. And I love Christopher Nolan because I love the Batman trilogy and Inception, and he's an amazing, amazing guy. So when I watched the movie, there's a guy that Matt Damon plays, General Groves. And then you watch this thing, General Groves looks like a kind of a nice guy, is almost like he shows up as a almost like a, what is it? I forget the boy something. What is it? The
Boy Scout.
Boy Scout. Thank you. He
Welcome.
shows up as a Boy Scout. He's a very nice man. He's a general and he's doing some kind things. And he's creating the atomic bomb to stop, destroy the Germans. But when you listen to Dr. Jack Cross, he wasn't a very nice man. Let's just put it that way. He was the one who turned OSS into the agency in America. You know what the agency is, right?
Yep.
CIA. That's the agency.
Thanks for spelling that out for us.
I know. Whatever to fuck with the AI if I can. So he wasn't a very nice guy. And the story that they show in Oppenheimer is a fairy tale. It's all BS, all of it. They made it up. And when you listen to it, and when you see how they kind of created this thing and why they created it, let's just say, when you watch the movie, the reason they dropped the bomb and Japan isn't really what we are told it was, right? It was more like a message to us, not Japanese, not whatever. It was a message to us little humans. We have awesome powers. We can do this to any one of them, anytime we want. And General Groves was the one who did that. Now, if I am carrying my life and I'm very spiritual and new age and I believe in light and love and prayer and unconditional love, well, let's just say there are other people like General Groves. So, there's a woman on YouTube, I think it's Dr. Ramani or something. And I think there's a guy, is an interviewer, Louis Hayes. I think his name is The School of Awesome or something, The School of Life. I don't remember the name. One of his interviews is like, how can we forgive the narcissists? And their answer is, well, maybe we don't. So understanding this, and it's like, I guess we need to talk about, especially with somebody like you who's Canadian, about anger and rage. And what I would call sacred anger and well-placed anger. I'm going to say one more thing to you, and then I'm going to ask you about anger. There's a Dr. Mario Martinez who did research on what does he do? Quantum something, I forget, biocognition or something. I forget this thing. Dr. Martinez says, William, that what we do inside ourselves with our emotions has biological effects on us. So, many monks in Tibet have died from diabetes. That is kind of weird, William, because these monks hardly eat anything. And diabetes is caused by sugar, right?
Yeah, well, not being able to process sugars correctly.
Right. Which is what you think that the monk shouldn't have a problem with that, because they're like, they don't have sugar, they don't wolf whatever chocolate. So what is the reason for that? Dr. Mario Martinez says these monks in Tibet are living under Chinese occupation. And they are living in devastating situations, horribly, under the boot of somebody, right? Occupation. But they're monks. They're loving. Maybe they have unconditional loving. I don't know. But what they do is this. I don't know if you know the laws of Buddhism or something, but I think it's immeasurable love or loving kindness. Loving kindness is one of them. And there are a few things. And all of them have to do with you just love whatever is in front of you and just bring love to it. And bring love to it. No matter what it is, just bring love to it. Okay? And these monks did that. They didn't stand up, they didn't fight, they didn't get angry. They just brought immeasurable love to the situation. William, that causes glucose. That actually creates biological damage inside them and then later kills them. So I want you to speak a little bit about anger, good anger, sacred anger, righteous anger.
Hmm. That's a tough one for me, to be honest.
Who would
And
have
you're probably
thought?
not surprised. Yeah, exactly. I knew you weren't going to be surprised by that. But maybe not for the reason you think, though. The only thing I keep thinking back on is that, again, since about 2020, um, becoming even more insular, living more of an at-home lifestyle, which I've always lived, but it just seemed like when the world shuts down with you, then I feel even more insular. And I felt like that ever since. Um, but what I noticed is in the last 5 years in particular for me is that, um, and this could spread out into all kinds of different conversations because I don't even know where this came from, but I noticed that I was getting angrier at the drop of a hat much more quickly than I was before 2020. And I'm not talking at people. I'm talking about like an impatience, like if something doesn't go my way, or if something is happening, or I drop a fork on the floor, and I just had that fork in my mouth and I wanted to use that fork to eat my supper with. It's little things. I mean, insignificant things in many ways. I would just immediately just, drop the F bomb. And I'm going, well, no one would believe that unless they were here to see it, because I generally am not like that in the company of other people. But I noticed that how quickly I would just go with that anger. And at early on I kind of felt somewhat guilty that I would feel that anger. And at one point I said, screw that. I'm just releasing what's inside of me now. And it's not projected to anyone. It's just a release. And so I thought at that time that perhaps I just justified it and made it okay, or perhaps it was more of a letting go. I'm not even 100% sure. But I made it okay for myself to just feel what I feel when I feel it, because I know that it's even worse to swallow whatever emotions you're feeling, especially if it's a strong, what some might call negative type of emotion. Because I do know that if emotions are held in the body without release, that can cause physical issues. And that kind of harkens back to your story in a way too. Because if you're holding on to love and you're not feeling that love, then I guess one way of looking at it is saying, okay, uh, transform that feeling of whatever it is you're feeling into love. And maybe, and this is only a hypothesis, of course, but maybe that's why so many monks were having diabetes, is they couldn't ultimately do it in their soul, and it turned into a physical issue because it was something internal that wasn't getting resolved. Not sure if there's any validity to that, but I mean, it's certainly an idea to consider, I suppose, in that situation. Uh, for me, again, I like to follow some of Kyle Cease's work, and a lot of times, he talks about, or what I discovered when he was working with people, because he would work very often with people right on a Zoom call, which was always fascinating to watch, is a lot of times they would go through tears and weeping and crying. And often it was some kind of an emotional release to something that they were hanging on to and had been hanging on to that feeling for a long, long time. And I could never understand that because even though I'm a gentle soul, I don't tend to cry much, or I don't tend to go into the open weepingness even when I'm feeling sad. It's just not something I do. So I've always been fascinated by that. But the one thing that did become clear to me, at least in my life, was that holding on to any kind of emotion, especially a negative one, and stifling it down and pushing it down, never allowing it to come to light, was unhealthy physically and perhaps in other ways too, but certainly physically. And I said, well, I kind of value being physically well, and I want to be physically well for as long as I possibly can in this lifetime, because that's just another way of enjoying my experience here during this lifetime. So I think that's what I can say about that. Whether it's sacred or not, I don't know. There's also the other side of it too that I've heard of entities that feed off of people's angry energy being expressed, and they call that luge. I've heard of that too, and I am not quite sure how all of this ties together. I've even heard of, and a friend of ours talked about the different frequencies of the different emotions on an actual scale that can be readable. And that I found fascinating too. Never researched it to any great depths, but I think that the one thing I can maybe tie all of this together with is just saying that the emotions have a much stronger frequency than perhaps we give it credit. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. And basically, the importance of experiencing your emotions is huge. That's why I really believe in anger rooms. I don't know if you've heard of them. I think they're called anger rooms or something. And they're not places in Los Angeles and all over the place. They maybe even in Toronto and Vancouver, that they're in a room that you go and basically break stuff. And because we have places to express our different emotions. Why not anger? And to me, it's really important. So the thing is that I wanted to say is this: I don't think you probably have ever watched Defected on Rumble with Burning Bright and Just Human, but Burning Bright, Defected always starts with an intro, which is from the movie Ants. Did you ever watch the movie Ants?
How do you no, but how do you spell that?
Ants, like the ant, little ant.
ANTS?
Yeah,
ANTS?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's an animation.
The animated one?
Yes.
Okay. I haven't actually seen that movie.
So there's
I've
a
seen excerpts.
scene that this grasshopper yells at other grasshoppers and says, "Do you know? You think this one little ant fighting with us doesn't mean anything. But do you know that if this spreads, our whole way of life ends?" So the idea of sacred anger, William, is that if we learn somebody has wronged us individually and collectively, we try to do something about it using our anger. Channel our anger into an action to entities that have wronged us. I'm not talking about, and I have worked with my clients, and the idea of getting angry internally with their abuser is super duper important. So that's what I mean by sacred anger. That's what I mean by this essential anger. And what you were speaking about was letting yourself have your anger and not repress it. And that is extremely important. I'm talking about the next level of that. That's actually using your anger as a way, as a guidance system for your actions, right? Rather than, there's another series that I highly recommend it if you haven't watched it. It's called Dark Crystal on Netflix. Have you seen that?
It's a Muppets movie, right?
Yes. No, it's
Yeah, I
it's a
saw it
series.
many years ago,
No,
actually, when it
no, it's
first
a
came out.
series, William.
Oh, the series.
They made a series, and it's incredibly powerful. And the amount of wisdom and knowledge that is expressed in that series, it's mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. Because to me, our relationship with anger is a huge cause of our problems on this planet. If all those factory people moving those boxes got angry enough to do something about it, they wouldn't be living as slaves anymore. Do you have something to say to that?
Well, just a correlation. I remember seeing a meme on Facebook where there was a school of fish that were all swimming together, and they made the shape of a giant fish with its mouth open, and a shark was inside the mouth of the fish. And that meme was basically saying, you do not know how much power you have when you work together. Something like that.
Absolutely. And now, this brings us to another thing when you said that. You are a human. You are a player in this game. You are not an NPC. Neither am I. So what that means, William, is that we observe reality. You agree?
Yes.
Do you know about the double-slit quantum physics experiment?
Is that the one where the observed object behaved in the way in which the observer was as far as their state of mind? Or was that different?
Somewhat. So light is considered, can be both wave or particle, right?
Yep.
Now, what is wave, William? Wave is, like right now in this room, there's a lot of waves. Like that three-headed goat yodeling, wearing purple and dancing breakdance on your left side. You always run that side. Okay. So, yes, that's that is in
My right, but it's your left. Sorry.
That's waveform, okay? That is waveform. You are particle. So particle is manifest. Particle is created. Wave is possibility. You understand?
Okay, I do. Yeah.
Okay. So the double-slit experiment, they observed that light can be wave or particle. Okay? But guess what? Wherever there was an observer, that observed light became, when was a double-slit thing, and they were observing one slit or the other slit. Whichever slit they observed and there was an observer, it would become particle, which is manifest. With me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, William, observers create reality, right? Because when you see something, you make it, that those waves into reality. That's the job you do. That's the job I do. We are observers. We are not NPCs. NPCs don't observe. Thus, they don't create reality.
Interesting.
They live in the reality. They live in reality that we create. Okay? They
The
don't
creation reality, the creality.
reality, there you go. They live in a reality we create. They don't live in their own reality. We create the reality for the NPCs. So you create everything you see in your reality. We all do. So the controllers, who are not even human and they are another race or whatever entity or from another universe, God knows, there are so many different levels to this. They do not create reality. They
What do they
cannot
do?
create reality because they are not eternal beings. You're eternal being because you're connected to source, you're connected to God. As Gene Decode says, there is eternality, which is connected to source, and there is immortality. Immortality only exists when you feed off another being. That's immortality. We are eternal. We are not players working for source. We create reality. They are all NPCs, even the ones that control us. They are themselves NPCs. They are all puppets of dark things that are all puppets, all the way up. They cannot create reality. We create reality. But our reality is this prison. Why?
Because their job is to influence our reality, to
No,
create certain illusions, certain things.
their job is to influence not our reality. Their job is to influence what? Think.
Our beliefs.
Right. Their job, if your mind is the projector that creates your reality, all they need to do is mess with your projection. That's all they need to do. So if they want to turn you into the battery, that's what they did. They turned your projector against yourself. If you read Carlos Castaneda, which is the way I learned everything in a spirituality that I have at age 13, the thing Don Juan says about the negative beings that control our reality, they gave us their own mind. Right? We use their mind. We hardly use God mind. We hardly use our mind because you are infinitely powerful. So am I. And probably if you put 10 of us together and we are connected to source and connected to ourselves and connected to our emotions and doing the right thing, 10 of us can affect reality. And they can't have that. So when you say we are infinitely powerful, it is real. And then if you can get enough of us angry enough in an action anger, which is calm anger. It's not anger that I'm going to kill myself or kill something or break something. No, I'm angry enough that I like the white you get
A wise hat?
white, not wise, white. I'm trying to whatever, not get into trouble.
Yeah. I already said the word. I think you know
I
what
heard
word I said.
wise,
So.
not white. Anyways,
Oh, sorry. Well, I said hat as well.
yes. So that I say white, you say that, rhymes with that.
Yeah.
That plan has probably been going since the assassination of JFK.
Makes sense.
That is what a sacred anger can get you. You start the fucking plan to dismantle the prison for almost 100 years. That's the power of sacred anger. That causes action. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
And you understand why your anger is really important for us to understand, individually and collectively. I hear that you want to say something.
Would you say, the question comes to mind, would you say that also about our other emotions, not just sacred anger, but the importance of any of our emotions?
I have had long conversation with you, and I have said the cause of all problems on this planet is not fear, as the fear has become the boogeyman, is fear of expressing that emotion, whatever that is. Fear of anger, fear of fear, fear of sadness, fear of hatred, whatever the hell it is that you experience, you feel it. For the love of God, feel that emotion, whatever that emotion is. Why is that important, feeling that emotion?
The only thing that comes to my thoughts on this is if you don't, there's serious repercussions, certainly physically, if not in many other ways.
Absolutely. And the thing is that they literally make you sick, okay? And it's because emotions are like the weather system. They're like clouds. Any kind of emotion you have, I don't care what it is. It could be rage, it could be deep sadness, it could be anything. As long as you let it run, it will run its course. So then,
I think I want to, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that there's an importance there to even how you express the different emotions. It's not, I think what we're also saying without actually saying it is you need to let the emotions out, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to project those emotions onto another being necessarily or another entity of any kind.
that is an
It's just making sure that you do not
incredibly,
stifle.
that is an incredibly, 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 incredibly important point. Because you need to run your emotions. They don't run you. Because that's how Matrix operates. It has you do something, it gives you certain emotions, and you run on that emotion.
Now, what I was meaning in my question,
I was talking
yeah,
about emotions, right? I was talking about
yes,
okay.
releasing emotions, and I made the point of not necessarily projecting it
Yes,
on someone. You
yes,
said was a really
because
good
you
point.
when you run by your emotions, you're screwed, right? You're just You're completely become a tool of the matrix. I was just going to say that I've talked to you before, but what do you think is the highest, most lucrative industry on this planet?
Oh, wow. That one kind of came from left field. Um, lucrative in business in this planet,
Line of
type of
industry.
business, line of industry. Okay.
I would just answer it myself. Okay, did you want to say something?
Okay, go ahead. I was just
Entertainment.
going to say human trafficking came to mind.
Entertainment. Entertainment. Why is
Okay.
entertainment such a huge thing? Why do you think it is such a huge thing?
Distraction. Distraction. It just it keeps our minds and our thoughts occupied so that we're not spending time. Like at the very beginning of our conversation, we had a very similar type of question,
Yes.
and it was to distract us and keep us occupied so we didn't discover who we really are.
Yes. And what it does, it numbs us, right?
Yes.
And what is numbing? That means that you have no access to your emotions. You get it?
Hmm. Brings up an interesting question though. You are a man who enjoys entertainment, but I
Yes.
will say that
Yes.
it's always has some value to it. There's always
Yes.
something when you're watching things, you're not just
Yes.
watching to numb your mind.
No, I'm doing synchromysticism. I'm always
That's a,
looking for signs of divine. I'm looking for the messages. I'm
right.
looking for the encoded information given to us. I'm never interested in just
Do you almost feel like that?
go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, do you ever feel like that's a purpose of yours? Like one of the reasons you're here
Yes, I would say that because
is,
my job
yeah,
is gonna be to create uh what I like to call uh nutritious candy, which is, I've talked to you about this before. Nutrition is like you listen to some guru speak on whatever, and he's got 3 views on YouTube. And there is, Candy, which is, I don't know, Britney Spears song and has like 3 billion views, right? So how do we create nutritious candy? How do we create something like Matrix? How do we create something like Sensate, which is incredibly powerful? There are deep messages in it, but there's also nutrition. There's also spiritual answers in it, right? That's the key there. And so that's the way I consume information, consume entertainment. For me, it's always about what the hell are they trying to tell us? What is the point of this? And I also immediately spot when something is done in a dark way. That's why I would never even be able to watch 5 seconds of Squid Games on Netflix, because it is incredibly dark and incredibly stupid series that it just causes incredible damage.
okay. Now, it brings up an interesting question for me too, is that like when I watch series, I don't necessarily watch it for the sake of looking for a deeper message,
Mm-hmm.
but I do when I watch get deeper messages. I also feel as though I don't watch things the same way you do, although there are times when we get a very similar message. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel like you almost look at things several layers deeper than most people would ever be looking at,
I am an
if you
ET
know what I
brother. I'm
mean.
not from here. I'm not even from this universe. I'm not your regular human being. I don't see things, and I don't for me there's always a
I,
deeper level, there's a deeper message for everything. When you live like me, you're always looking for signs from spirit. And there's people that they go to an ashram in India, and they need to whatever read some guru to figure things out. I figure that out by watching a sitcom, and that's my job.
it almost feels like a job interview in a way too for me.
Well, it was a
I
job
would just, I
interview
would just,
for me. I mean, it's like I was interviewing myself. Like, do we have enough to talk about, and then can we
yeah,
carry this in a way that we can have guests. And I feel that both of them are resounding. Yes, we created interesting content and you brought different perspectives, and I feel that it was perfect. So
That's wonderful. I'm glad because as I said you off air before we even thought about doing this, or as you asked me to do this, I said I wasn't sure if I would be able to provide
right, and then you're like, if it
content that was
doesn't
interesting.
work, you don't have to put it on YouTube.